morning, third graders. This is Miss Jaramillo, and I'm just going to take some time to go over your intervention, adding and subtracting activity this morning. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the paper that you have in front of you. You'll notice that I did a sample problem up here at the top, but I'm going to go ahead and work on that with you on a separate sheet of paper. So I'm going to have you take a look at this real quick, and then I'm going to put a separate sheet of paper down here, and I'm going to take the first problem, the sample problem, which is 202 minus 27. So remember, you're starting with the total amount of whatever that is, and you're subtracting 27 of that amount from here. So we look at the ones place. Now, do you have to start in the ones place? No, you don't have to start in the ones place. But remember what I told you. It's a good idea because in case you need to borrow, you need to be able to borrow from the next place value. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's look at our ones place. We have 2 minus 7. Now, we know that we can't subtract a larger number from a smaller number. So that tells us that we need to borrow a 10. But as you notice, there are no 10s to borrow. So what that means is we have to borrow 100, which will leave us with 100 left. We're going to take that 100 and we're going to regroup it here as 10 tens. And remember, 10 tens makes 100. Or if you wanted to put 100 there, you could, just as long as you remember it's not 100 tens, it's 10 tens. Now, once we've gotten our regrouped tens here, now we can say, oh, well, I have enough tens to now borrow a 10 and add it to this 2. And when I add 10 and 2, that makes 12. And so we don't have 2 anymore, we have 12 ones. So when I have my 12 ones and I subtract 7 ones, we can say, oh, well, what can I add to 7 to make 12? Well, 5 and 7 makes 12. So 12 minus 7 is 5. Now I go to my tens place. I know that 9 minus 2 is going to be 70, or 90 minus 20 is 70. And this 100 that was left after I borrowed 10 tens is now going to be 175. So 202 minus 27 in the break apart strategy, you could take that 200. We don't have any hundreds that we're subtracting. So that leaves us with 200. We can take the 0 tens and subtract the 2 tens, which is 20. But we know we can't do that because we don't have enough to subtract. So we're going to borrow 100 and regroup it here as 100. And now we can subtract 100 minus 20, which would be 80. And I'm just going to put it under here just so I can see what I have left once I've subtracted. So now we're going to take the 2 minus the 7, which we know we can't do because, again, we can't subtract a larger amount from a smaller amount. So again, I'm going to borrow, and that's going to leave me with 70. And I'm going to regroup it here as 12, just like I did here when I regrouped and borrowed from the tens place here. And that is going to leave me with 5. So now I take the 100 and the 70 and the 5 and put it back into a whole number of 175. So stop here, pause here. If you want to go back and revisit some of your problems that you probably have already done. For example, question 1 was a subtraction problem, and problem 3 and 5 were subtraction problems. So if this is something that you are being helped with, and it's reminding you that you need to do some more regrouping, then pause this video and go back. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on. I'll start with number 1. number 1, and I'll just bring my paper back over here that we originally started with. We have 604, and we're subtracting 37. So now, again, I look at my ones place. I see that I cannot subtract 7 from only 4. I know that I cannot subtract, so that tells me I need to borrow a 10. But as you can see, just like in the last problem, we don't have any 10s to borrow. So I'm going to go to the hundreds place. I'm going to borrow one of those hundreds, and I'm going to group it over here as 10 tens, because what is 10 tens? It's 100. And then once I borrowed my 10 tens, now I can borrow again and regroup that 10 here with this 4 for the ones, 14 ones. So no longer do I have 4 ones, I have 10 and 4, which makes 14. 14 minus 7, well, we know that 7 plus 7 is 14. 90 minus 30 is 60. And 500, we don't have any hundreds to subtract, so 567. Even if you were to take 600 and subtract, let's say 40, 600 minus 40 would be 560. So just rounding and thinking in that idea might even help you get an about answer before you actually start working this out. It's called being reasonable, right? If something's not reasonable, we should revisit it and make sure that we're correct. Okay, break apart strategy. We know that this is going to be 600. We don't have any 10s there, but we do have some that we're subtracting. So that tells us we don't have anything to subtract, so that we can subtract this 30 from something. So we don't have any, so we're going to go ahead and borrow 100, regroup it here as 100. 100 minus 30, well, we know that when we add 70 plus 30, 70 plus 30 is 100. We go to the ones place. We know we can't subtract because you can't subtract 7 from only 4. We're borrowing a 10, which leaves us with 60. We regroup that 10 as 14, just like we did here, and we subtract 14 minus 7 is 7. Now we put that all back together, and we have 567, and we double check, is that what we got with our algorithm? Yes, it is. If you did not get the same answer, then somewhere along the way, one of your strategies is not being done correctly. So double check it if they did not both come out to the same difference. Okay, now we're looking for the sum. The sum is the answer to an addition sentence. We're going to start in the ones place here, and we're going to add. And again, you don't have to start in the ones place, but again, it's a good strategy because of the fact you might have to carry enough ones to make a new 10 or enough 10s to make a new 100. So 9 plus 7, those extra math facts should be coming in. 16, add a 10, 90, and one more 10 is 100. So we know that this is going to make a new 100. So this 60 is just going to go down here in the tens place. And that 100 from here is going to get regrouped right there. That's a new 100. And this 300 plus 100 is 400 plus 100 is 500. 566. Now, you'll also notice that 199 is really close to what? If you said 200, yeah, you're right. So what if we said 200 plus 367? Well, we would add 2 more hundreds here, which would make 567. And then we would just subtract ones because we over added 1. We would just take 1 away. So that's another strategy you could use. You could add a 1 to the 199, make it 200, and then just take it back out. But for the purpose of the break apart strategy, we're going to go ahead and break apart our place values. So 100 plus 300 is 400. 90 plus 60 is going to be 150. Because one more 10 here is 100. That would leave us with 50 here. Then we have a 9 and 7, and 9 and 7 make 16. Add the 400 with the 100, which is 500. With the 50 is 550. With the 10 is 560. With the 6 is 566. 566. Wow, well that's pretty strange because look at our sum compared to our difference. It just so happens that those seem to be pretty close. So it just goes to show you that even if you're subtracting, sometimes your sum and your difference can be fairly close if you work it out. Now, are these opposite of each other? No, but they're pretty close. Okay, let's go ahead and turn our paper over. Again, starting in the ones place. We can see we cannot subtract 7 from only 2. We're going to borrow a 10. This time we have 10s to borrow, so that's going to leave us with 30. We're going to add the 10 with the 2 to make 12. And 12 minus 7 is 5, because 5 plus 7 is 12. We can't subtract 90 from 30, so we're going to borrow 100, and we're going to be left with 300. Now, that tells us that we have 10 10s, and we're going to add them to these 3 10s to make 13 10s, which is 130. We're going to take this 130 and subtract 90. If you're not sure, go up. 1 more is 100, and 3 more would be 130, which is 4. So 90 plus 40 is 130. No hundreds here to subtract, so that's going to give us 345. Remember, this is pretty close to 100, so even if I subtracted 100 from 442, that would give me 342. So you know by being a little reasonable about what you're subtracting, it should be pretty close to what you think is going to happen here. So again, we're going to start with our hundreds and subtract. We're going to take the 40 and subtract the 90, but we can't do that. So we're going to borrow 100 to make this 140. We made it 130 here because we had to borrow right away. So this might be confusing, but if we did regroup it here, it would have been 140. Now take that 140 and subtract 90. Subtract 90, and that's going to give us 50. And now we're going to subtract the ones. 2 minus 7 can't be done because 7 cannot be subtracted from 2. We are going to borrow, which leaves us with the 40 that's there. We are going to regroup it just like we did here and make it 12. 12 minus 7 is 5. We take the 300 plus 40 is 340 plus 5 is 345. So give yourself a star if you did that correctly, a star above the algorithm, and a star above here. All right, let's go on to our next problem, which is going to be adding to find the sum. So we have 8 and 2. We know that we can add 8 and 2, of course, because this is not going to need regrouping or borrowing. So we can just go straight into adding. 8 and 2 is 10. Enough ones to make a new 10. 80 and 20 is 100, so we know that there's already going to be a new 100 here. So that's going to leave us that 110 here, so that's 110. And we regroup that 10 here as 100. 800 plus 100 is 900. Plus 1 more 100 is 1,000. Plus 1 more 100 is 1,100. So 1,110. Here we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start with our hundreds, which is going to be automatically 1,000. The 20 and the 80 are also going to give us our 100, which was here, and our 2 and our 8 is going to give us a 10. So if you notice, we have a 1 in the thousands place, a 1 in the hundreds place, a 1 in the tens place, and a 0 in the ones place. I think I said tens place here, I think, but 0 in the ones. So 1,110, is going to be what we have there. And now we're going to go into our last subtraction sentence. We go to the ones place, and yes, we can subtract. 5 minus 1 is 4. And we're going to, so 5 minus 1 is 4. We can subtract because this is a smaller amount than the 5. We can't subtract the tens place because we are working on making sure that we borrow. And once we borrow, we can take those 10 tens and add it to this one more 10 to make 110 or 11 tens. Now we're going to take those 11 tens and subtract 2 tens, and that's going to leave us with 9, because 90 plus 20 is 110, and 400 minus 100 is 300. 394. So let's go over here and subtract our hundreds place, subtract our tens, and we know that we can't do this, so we borrow 100, which is going to give us 110. We subtract 20, so we could subtract this 10, which would make 100, and then one more 10, which is going to make that 90. And then we take the 5 and subtract the 1. 5 and 1 is going to give us 4, and we put it all back together as 394. 394. And so if you did that correctly, good job. Give yourself a star for each one of those if you did it correctly. Remember, there's going to be an exit ticket. So for today, you need to make sure that you've been paying very close attention to how you are breaking this up and putting it back together when you're adding and subtracting. See you soon. I'll see you this afternoon in math. Have a great day, guys.